It's Nub, it's Nub, it's Nub TV. It's Nub, it's Nub, it's Nub TV.
I want to say a big welcome to Evelyn Hollow, parapsychologist and broadcaster. Welcome to Nub TV, Evelyn.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to get your ideas on the possible link between paranormal activity and quantum physics. Can you just go into that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so for me, the kind of intersection between those two fields started when I was doing my undergrad in psychology, and I was really interested in consciousness. And you know, I feel like the single greatest unsolved problem of psychology, perhaps of the whole human race, is Chalmers's hard problem of consciousness. And nobody can work out where it comes from, what it is, what it's made of.
Yeah.
And I started to get this idea that maybe it was much smaller than we ever perceived it to be. Maybe it was right down into individual particles, if you like, or molecules. And then once I started to consider that, I went, okay, well, we've been looking at this the wrong way, because macro large systems are governed by classical physics. Very, very small things are governed by quantum physics. And once you started to look at things that we would deem paranormal, like ghosts, you know, things that can blip in and out of existence, things that seem to behave strangely, or their time seems to behave strangely, suddenly it started to make a bit more sense. And I think over the years, instead of coming away from that, I've come closer to it. As science has started to progress, we've started to potentially be able to show that consciousness is individual or built up of a component of individual particles. And we know, we've now proven entanglement, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
So that we know that things across vast distances can still interact at the same time. And so I think that for me, although a lot of the paranormal can be explained in terms of physics, it doesn't make it not paranormal. It still is.
Sure.
But I think a lot of the strange things that we would call magic or ghosts or poltergeists, are actually just the inherent strangeness of quantum physics.
Okay, that's got me thinking. So I guess this leads to a broader thing. What is the paranormal? Where does it come from?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of different categories within paranormal phenomena. And in terms of things like ghosts and poltergeists, where we're looking at what we believe to be some form of human spirit, essentially, or human consciousness, and it's able to interact with the environment, whether that's apparitions, you know, things that blip in and out of existence, and people seeing things pass through walls, but also poltergeists in particular, who are able to interact with the physical environment. So like chairs are thrown, doors are slammed, things like that. That is one section of it. But then also you've got other paranormal phenomena, which might be people's belief in things like cryptids or, you know, creatures. And that's kind of more into the sort of mythology area. And that's sort of like paranormal, I guess, you know, zoology, essentially. And then also a lot of people have started to class, you know, like alien or ufology in with paranormal phenomena, even though that's a, you know, quite a separate thing. So it's a broad area. But I think I've definitely, more kind of worked in the although the history of mythology and the history of belief systems in and of themselves as a psychologist, but as a scientist, it's more into the actual science of anomalous events, like how does something pass through a wall, or how do objects get thrown from a table with no obvious force, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, so how do they? That's the question.
Yeah, so a chunk of it to me is, we know through, like we were talking about there, about entanglement. So is it that objects become entangled? Also, is it that something is able to enact a force upon it? So if we were to show, right, so you see these things that everyone has one now, where they're on your desk and it's magnets, so you'll have like a globe spinning. If you showed that to somebody 50 years ago, they would be like, that is black magic. Because we didn't understand how the electromagnetic fields worked. And so just because it's an unseen force doesn't mean that it's not there. We've started to dig into particles that we didn't know existed. So we got through into quarks and neutrinos and things like that. We're still trying to understand how certain particles, and we've shown it scientifically, can blip literally in and out of existence.
Okay.
You know, how can things not have mass? A lot of the universe is made up of, you know, like dark matter, and we still don't really understand what that is. So a lot of it still looks like magic. You know, how do particles blip in and out of existence? But we know that they do. So is it possible if you had enough of these particles together, or something else that's governed by the same principles, has the same components, can it also blip in and out of existence?
I mean, is it blipping in and out from another time or another dimension?
Well, yeah, because some people believe that it's, you know, sort of bubble universe theory, that there's multiple layers to reality and that things can cross over. And so essentially there is scientifically a seen and unseen world, because we can't see, you know, individual particles, we can't see these things, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. We had to build things like microscopes, you know, Hubble telescopes, even the Mass Hadron Collider, to be able to observe these things. So is it that some things are just not readily observable? We can see them interacting with our environment. We know something is causing it, but we're having to use kind of Planck's constant, where in mathematics, if you had the, you know, if you had the theorem, when you're kind of having to work backwards, you know, there's an interaction there, but you don't know what it is. So you insert Planck's constant. That is kind of what we're doing at the moment. We know something is happening. We've got a couple of theories as to what might explain it, but we're just not at the point yet of going, that is exactly what that is. It's not an observable system yet. So we're kind of using Planck's constant.
Okay. So does that mean if someone sees a ghost or hears a voice from somewhere, is that going to be a dead person returning, or is that going to be someone from the future and it's just kind of a blip glitching in and out of time? What's your...
Yeah, that's the thing, because time is the most bizarre thing. And we are kind of stuck in this linearity where we believe, because for us time is linear, and we kind of believe that, but it's not true. You know, time is kind of a flat circle. And when you look at space-time, and you look at how things are governed by our perception of time, and how time can be bent, you know, on the edge of a black hole, things like that, then we're always assuming that the time that we experience here is linear, simply because that's what we're experiencing, but that's not how other things in the universe experience it. So, you know, people always say, well, why do we only see ghosts from the past? And it's not true. There are lots of cases where people have seen what they believe to be a ghost, but in modern clothes. And also, is it a thing where when you die, you've got to decompose? Is it that if consciousness is somehow in individual particles, they sort of spread out? Obviously, all energy is reused in the universe, and it spreads out. Is it that enough of it has to get back together for it to work? In the same way that a single magnet only has very little power, but if you put loads of them together, suddenly they have this great interaction and alteration. So that might be also one of the theories, is that there has to be enough of it together for something to happen. Okay,
I think I've got you there. So it's not, when someone basically sees a ghost or hears a voice, it's not necessarily a dead relative coming back from the afterlife or stuck in transition. I'm just trying to get my head around it, really.
Yeah, I think there's sort of lots of different theories as to why that happens. So is it that when we talk about the afterlife, a lot of people think it's, you know, a place, whether it's like a heaven or a hell or a purgatory or things like that. But is it just that, you know, going back to older belief systems where you become part of everything else, because that is what physically happens? Is it that you become part of everything else, but when there's enough of it together, we get these interactions? Because we look at, like, what's the difference between ghosts and poltergeists? Why are poltergeists so powerful? How can they obliterate rooms and things like that and cause like physical bodily harm? And there's been cases with deaths involved and things like that. So how are they so powerful? And there's a couple of different theories, and one of them is that somehow they're drawing power, because everything, well, most things in the universe have a charge, an electrical charge. So is it that whatever the system is, it requires electrical charge to be able to power itself. So we know that that is a lot of how, you know, if you pass a charge through molecules, they behave totally differently. You get these sort of reactions. Is that the case? So is that why in paranormal cases, like when people are investigating, all of their equipment dies? We see lights blown, equipment that's got brand new. I mean, I've worked on cases where literally I've got 3 camera guys with big battery packs, fresh, brand new in, and they go into a place and it dies. They put a new one in, they go into a room, something happens, and it dies.
That's not a myth thing, because you hear that all the time. People say, oh, my battery's been drained. It's true. That's your experience of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that recurrently, more than any other area I've ever worked in, happens in paranormal cases. Oh. And it's really difficult to explain away. You can test and test stuff again and again. Why specifically is it fine? And then you go into these locations with paranormal activity and suddenly all of the equipment is drained, including the backups. Like, why is that happening?
Sure. And there's also, what about people who go into these situations, become fearful, scared? Does that then feed that energy into whatever's doing this, or is that just a myth?
So that's another kind of section of it, is it something that either feeds off of you? We see this a lot in poltergeist cases, or there's also this older theory of RSPK, which is recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, where some people believe that rather than it being an external system, it's a person themselves generating the phenomena. There's this sort of idea of zero-sum energy, and that they themselves, under great emotional stress and duress, are somehow projecting something from themselves that's causing them to interact with their environment. You know, that sort of carry effect, Stephen King's Carrie, that sort of thing.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, just go into a bit more about your own personal experience with, say, poltergeist activity.
So I think the biggest case I've ever worked on is definitely probably the Battersby poltergeist, which there was a big podcast done about, and then we did sort of a live tour of it. That case is absolutely insane, because it lasted like 10 years, which is just unheard of in poltergeist cases. And the level of phenomena in it is absolutely unparalleled. You know, when we talk about banging noises, I'm not talking about taps on walls. We're talking about stuff that was like 100 decibels.
Whoa.
Where neighbours flooded out into the street because they thought the house was being ripped apart. Also the variety of people involved, everything from policemen to insurance underwriters to television presenters and it just went on and on and on. And there's no, even though we could explain away some of the phenomena, because over a long time period, you expect some things to just get lumped in with paranormal phenomena, that's normal. We just cannot readily explain away like where any of that comes from. And the poltergeist cases are incredibly rare. They're the most talked about because lots of films and things made about them, but they're actually insanely rare. And I think especially for a case to last 10 years and have hundreds of people experience it, witness it, different types of phenomena, interact with it, and we still have no ready, you know, sort of environmental explanation or anything for it is absolutely unreal. So I think that's definitely the most ludicrous case I've ever worked on, and it's gripped everybody who's ever looked at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still ongoing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still can't get my head around it. I mean, you've got what is called the non-local mind, maybe consciousness being separate from the body. How does that fit in with the paranormal?
Well, yeah, I guess it's that, you know, is a poltergeist, is it a person? You know, is it just a type of essentially ghost residual consciousness that somehow has become more powerful than, say, a passive one, like just someone seeing a shadow or like a person walk through a wall or sort of blip in and out of existence? How did it become as powerful as it is? How is it able to like destroy living rooms or destroy furniture or create, you know, 100 decibel banging noises? And I think one of the most interesting things is looking at how things in these cases have been altered. So there's been interesting studies looking at, say, a chair is thrown with an unseen force in a poltergeist case. Is that piece of furniture then altered? So people would often look at people kept reporting that things that were thrown or moved or whatever during poltergeist cases, that they reported them being heavier. So
Wow.
people started to investigate, like, so when we were talking about like entanglement, did it alter the molecular structure of an object? Has it actually altered the weight? Because that would be a way for us to show physically how something has become entangled or how it has altered its state. Obviously, it's hard to investigate these things because when people report that phenomena, you then have to have controlled environment. How do you recreate a poltergeist case in a laboratory? That's what makes the work so bloody difficult.
Sure. Wow, that's fascinating. I never knew that. I mean, do you think we're ever going to get to the bottom of it to be able to explain it rationally, or is it going to be one of those things that's just going to be unexplainable? And the more we look into it, the harder it gets to explain. I mean, it's a bit like the John Keel effect when he went to, experience the Mothman incidents in America. He came personally involved with it, and then it's very hard to be subjective and rational about these experiences. But maybe it's something we're not supposed to get to the bottom of.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, because when you yourself have an experience, it alters how you believe. And one of the strongest things for me is seeing people who are hardcore skeptics have experiences, and you watch it really wreck their psychology and of how they know the world to work. It absolutely, it's transcendental, but then, because then it does become personal, because you're so desperate to make sure that other people believe, so that you're not written off as being unhinged or a liar, that you have to, you work so hard to try and either recreate the phenomena or to experience it again with more people. And then you watch some people get, so obsessed that like Harold Tribbett in the Battersby poltergeist case. I mean, it consumed his entire life. And it's very difficult. Will we ever understand, or is it like the closer we are to it, the less we're able to understand? We're looking too closely.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. What are you up to at the moment, Evelyn?
I am filming a new television show for the Discovery Channel.
Great.
In Ireland, and I am in the middle of doing The Witch Farm, which is the new series that's out on BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. So similar to Battersby Poltergeist, the same sort of format, but a completely different case set in Wales. Third episode just came out yesterday. So it's more of a kind of haunted house case with intersections of witchcraft and things like that, and more kind of instead of it being a poltergeist case, it's more sort of like apparitions and strange phenomena. It's a really interesting case.
Okay, sounds really good.
Wild. And I think it's also the most exorcised house in all of UK history.
Okay, where's this house?
Yeah, it's in Brecconshire in Wales, Hale Vanog. Incredibly interesting area. But yeah, those are the kind of two big things I'm working on at the moment, and I'm hoping to finish a manuscript that's going to help us categorize types of paranormal phenomena, because I feel like one of the biggest problems that we have in science, we should be able to categorize it so that we know that we're testing or investigating what we're supposed to be doing, and nobody can agree on certain things. So I'm kind of creating this this hauntology handbook where I can categorize like stages of a poltergeist haunting, types of like what's the difference between a white lady, a blue lady, and a pink lady spirit. Like what is the difference between this level of haunting versus so, and just trying to quantify stuff and build structures so that we can look at these things with a categorized system. So that's kind of the manuscript that I'm working on at the moment, but trying to get time to work on it in between filming and radio and stuff is impossible.
Okay. And how can our viewers find out more about yourself?
Sorry, how can
our viewers find out more about yourself? Sorry.
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram and things like that. If you just search Evelyn Hollow, but I also have my website, just evelynhollow.com, which has got links to all the kind of work I've done, anything I've written, papers and things like that. But yeah, I'm mostly active on sort of Twitter and Instagram and things, and we talk about kind of the things that we work on and keep up to date with the shows that I'm on and episodes and interviews and stuff that come out. But yeah, I'm kind of readily available on social media, usually chatting nonsense and posting spooky stuff. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Evelyn. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Evelyn. That's brilliant. Thank you.
It's Nub TV. It's Nub.